Alright, so this is the part 3 of Electric Cups, which I'm making for my nephew, not my cousin. Haha. And let's hop right into it. What I wanted to talk about today was these mixing. What I'm doing for the lead voice on the saw or plugin. It's got a mono voice on right now, which of course means that only one note can play. I'm using the Maximus plugin. I usually turn the highs down, as if you can hear. Let's see. You'll be able to. It can be really harsh. So that's why I usually, especially on low quality synths like these, or I guess just on synths, so I usually have the highs turned down, more reverb, so you can hear that. For the bells, I also have again a Maximus and a delay bank. The delay bank is that it echoes. It naturally has a lot of echo in it anyway. Let's put them both back on. For the Maximus, I guess I just put it in. I didn't bother changing. It depends upon how and where you're playing it, which octaves. For this particular plugin, or for this particular synth, you'll notice the one thing that's really hard to get right when writing on the computer is you have to actually take time to do this, and I don't always, which is why I'm not a great composer. But you'll notice this bottom set of notes is the loudest set. Meanwhile, the ones just above it and the ones 2 octaves above are a lot quieter. That's why that it seems to have a bottom dominant, but it has this weird out of tune, and that's because I copy and pasted and put it up a perfect fifth. But if, as well as you know, in any scale, the notes in a harmonic scale, they're not all even. So like right here, this will be a diminished fifth, or it's actually not an augmented fifth. So that's why it sounds very much out of tune, and I like the effect. So that's why I wrote it that way. Hmm. For the bass, I was just monkeying with this. My bass is oftentimes I will put um, a boost on the lower frequencies, and again take off more off of the higher ones. Otherwise, you get a little bit of a chip sound with the bass. Basses usually have a problem um, where they have the higher frequencies have not been cut off, so they can oftentimes put a little chiff sound. For the orchestra 2, I put a gross beat on it, so it's got a gate. That just essentially tells it it's just shutting off and on the sound a lot. I like the sound because it's kind of like strumming, but it's for a keyboard, since I don't really do guitar. I didn't bother changing the orchestra 1. I usually like this sound. I like that sound way too much usually. I use that sound like all the time. For this, just a little glockenspiel. You'll notice on 6 it's also got the reverb, delay. I believe this one is on the 3 echo setting, so we have to go up here. So it's supposed to be hitting that thing 3 times when it's actually played. So it's kind of rat-a-tat-tat, except it's just very, in the actual mix itself, it doesn't sound very loud. Which reminds me, I forgot to say on the melody line. So if you have a mono on, so only one note plays, let's just put only the melody on. You can get similar effects if I were to say, draw this out. Actually, probably can't since these aren't. Here, let's just modify these slightly. So when you get the glide going up from one note to the next, it makes this kind of movement right here very possible. There's no way to write this. And so that's why I put a lot of little notes like this in, because when you've come up with a melody like this line, a lot of melody lines will leave a little space. And so since this isn't vocal, you don't have to breathe there. You can just keep adding notes in. And since it's just a happy, cheerful song for the most part, I just find the addition of these extra notes make it a lot more, give it a lot more personality. Also, see this line here. If you were to watch the first video in this short series, this is actually the bass line. Um, in tonal music, one of the techniques you use is actually to invert lines. So like if you wanted to write a descant, you can often take a alto line or a tenor line and you just knock it up an octave higher. And then you have sopranos, whichever one group is singing the soprano line, or if you have a second soprano line, you just simply shift everybody up. So that also could have been in the bass. Let's put the bass solo. Even though it's a piano texture, it is possible to have that in the bass. The Gandalf, the white, very interesting. Very interesting pad because the sound changes throughout it. On this, I have a chorus added, so. It just modifies the sound slightly. Also the flanger. A lot of these sounds will have pretty much the effects of a flanger or chorus in them already. This is just adding a slight bit more. This is mainly just a kind of ambient to fill the space. The actual sound takes too long to play for the amount of time it's playing. but in the context of the song, it kind of creates this juxtaposition between these big wahs and then this little guy going up and down. I wonder how that would sound if I. I just messed that up. Okay, and then we have oftentimes when I monkey with like the Cyrus synth, which is this is just an ARP off of it. I don't really mess with the knobs because I don't understand how to affect them, and I don't even know what I'm looking for. But when you have these two, you can kind of get the idea of a rhythmic sound from the ARP, and then the pad from the a pad from the pad sound. Again, I didn't put this into up I didn't put it into any of the mixers because I didn't have the sound playing that loud. You can see it never reaches maximum loudness. I wonder if that's in there. Yeah, and it's only at like what, 50, 60%, 60%. So with songs like this, I'll often put a lot of sound effects in them. For this one, I have the delay bank, the reverb, and the flanger on it. I'll often use the same plugins for an entire song. For both of the drum tracks, I actually have 3 drum tracks. I'm just again using the Contact 5 drum lap. I rewrote these drums a few times, but I didn't put them into a mixer because I didn't make them more the focal point. Oftentimes, when you have drums, like a snare, for example, the snare actually hits a variety of. Let's put it into 10 so I can show you. It hits so many different sounds. Some of them have only highs on. Let's see, can you hear that? So a lot of times these drums will have a whole variety of sounds that just one of them makes, especially the kick. So that's oftentimes why you have to actually put them into the mixer and tone things up or down and change the sounds, because otherwise you can't really make out what's going on. And you'll if you ever listen closely to people's mixes, they're oftentimes made with very particular headphones or outputs in mind. And when you don't have those, it'll sound wrong. So like I have I forgot the name. It's a HyperX, a 7.1 surround sound headset, and I don't actually mix in this oftentimes because if I did, it sounds differently than it does in normal speakers. So for this song, I put the triangle in and put the volume way up. This was to get more of the idea of 2 mad scientists tinkering with things. Also, because it's always interesting to me, when you have 2 lines like right here, while the scientists are tinkering, yeah, I think I messed that sound slightly up when I was moving everything around. Sometimes that happens. Uh, this is very similar to organ trio sonatas, where you have a very simple bass line, but it doesn't play sustained the whole time. It plays detached. And then you have a melodic line that bounces around. So this is actually like, this section is much more classical influence than not, which is probably why my music sounds weird. The bass drum, that also has the Maximus plugin. It's turning the highs off. Oops. This over here. And turn this on. So I'll put the highs up. So the sound of hitting the drum actually makes that high pitched squeak. So that's why I'll have this down. You notice I have the mids down too, because I'm trying to get a very particular sound. This is actually why if you ever see a professional bands set up, they can take 2 hours to set up. It's because they have to go through um, all the highs and lows of everything. It's rather annoying. I didn't end up using part 2. Because I used this part of the song slightly differently. So over here for pattern 3, which starts the song, I believe. Yeah, pattern 3 starts the song. What's going on here is just octaves. So in synthesizing music and music on computers, you just mess with this stuff a bit and you can kind of create the effects you want. I always like these bigger chords. And then you just put some I wonder what this is on to. Yeah, this is again set to another plugin to really cut the highs out of it, reduce those, and then it plays really quietly. So you don't even, it just more makes muddles the sound. The reactor. And when a robot dreams. Even though it's kind of a cheap way to write music, adding stuff like this does actually fill out some of the sounds of a song. The last thing I wanted to bring up in this video was the concept of creating clearer sounding music. So in like the middle section, this area, right? There's a melody line playing, a bass line playing, 2 drum tracks playing. That's it. And the music is going to be a lot clearer than when you get to this, where you have the glockenspiel playing, the orchestra 1, bass, lead, 2 drum tracks. And that oftentimes you'll hear this in music, and it's kind of a personal pet peeve of mine, that the sounds don't match at all. Like they'll have someone singing over somebody else, and you can't really make out who's singing what and what it's actually supposed to be. That's why I strive for a lot of simplicity in my music, even though I think there are certain points in the song where you really can't tell what's going on, especially the end. It's out of key now. Darn it. Yeah, these should be C sharps because we're in the key. Oh, maybe not. But we are in the key of B flat. Let's just mute the melody. So just adding in the bass drum at the end here, it really drives the sound. It actually kind of covers everything up. But it kind of works with the bass sound. Those two are working hand in hand. Also, one thing I find interesting is because higher sounds are naturally louder, this is actually something you learn in composing for flutes, is they're actually, I wonder where they don't say there. They're actually lower in the program's loudness than is the same exact set of notes, because otherwise these ones being so high, again, they get really shrill, they'll hurt your ears. And so this is kind of the project. I already uploaded the song. This is kind of what I came out with. It wasn't what I was anticipating when I began. I thought I'd get rid of this whole part of the song, like the first 20 measures. Yeah, actually it's more like first 25, 30 measures. But I just ended up keeping it anyway and then trying to work around it. So it's not exactly a fantastic piece of music, but it is what it is. Thanks for watching.